It's Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyright edition for our video channel, and we're here with the executive producer of the show, Huck. And Huck has made her appearance, and she's consciously aware of every move I make. And we've been outside running around playing, so she's a little out of breath, but she's a good girl. She likes coming in and making sure I'm doing my job. And did you know that you have a lot of fans out there, Huck? Other Great Pyrenees and all kinds of dogs that love you out there? Yeah, she's a good girl. Yeah, she's a good girl. Yes, a good girl. Yes, yes. Oh, give me a big yawn. That's a good one now. She's ready to take a nap. So, I'm going to get right into it here. Talk to you about what's going on. And talk about missing people. Missing people and what in the heck is going on in our world. There's been a lot of missing people as of late. The numbers seem to be going up. I get a lot of questions every week. Well, Dave, why is this case a missing 411 case? Or why did you pick this one to talk about? Well, the profile points for missing 411 have come about over 10 years. When you look at thousands of cases, certain things start to pop out. One of them, bodies found in water. Yeah, it's 100% true. A lot of people drown. It's 100% true that a lot of people fall into the water, don't know how to swim. But what about the people? Nobody sees them go in the water. They're good swimmers. They end up in the water and they're missing clothes if they're an adult. I'm sorry, that is odd. Especially if you're not rolling down a line of rocks like in a river that goes downhill. If you're in a river that just kind of mosey along, floats along, it's not going to take your clothes off. And little children do fall in the water. There's no doubt. One of the things I get commented on a lot is, Dave, why are you bad-mouthing search and rescue? I don't. I've never have. I won't, because those are volunteers. They're doing the best job they can. When I have a case where a body is found that's been searched over and over and over again, and the body's found in an area that's been searched that way, I don't believe it's a search and rescue's fault. I tend not to believe the body was ever there. But then, Dave, how does it automatically show up there? Well, that's why we're here. That's the million-dollar question. And a lot of people say, oh, no, I'm sorry, not a lot of people. There's been a few comments in the last couple days. Hey, your stories are slow, they're uninteresting, and they've gotten mundane in the last 6 months. Really? Really? I'm afraid that I would politely disagree with that. The case I'm going to talk about today is an absolute classic missing 411 case. If I would have heard about this case the first year I started doing this work, it sure would have helped. It would have helped me understand where I was going. And it would have enlightened me where sometimes I questioned myself. This would have sealed the deal for me on something. I'll explain in a bit. This boy was Jonathan Scott Marker, 2.5 years old. Disappeared February 18th, 1971 in Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville. Everyone called him Scotty. His father was a pretty famous guy, a guy named Carl Marker. He was a famous DJ in Louisville. It was called Weird Beard. He worked at WAKY Radio. Carl and his wife were divorced, Pat. Pat had at least a majority of the custody of the 3 kids. And her residence was at 227 Clermont, Clermont, in Louisville. They had 3 kids. They had Scotty at 2.5, Sally Joe was 8, and another brother named Tim was 4. The residence was 2 miles from the Ohio River. Pat was employed, and while she was at work, the babysitter came to the home and stayed with the kids. Carl essentially could come by and visit anytime he wanted, and he came by on February 18th, 1971. Came by the Clermont address. He knew the babysitter would be there, checked in, said hello. He said hello to 2 kids, and then he said, well, where's Scotty? And she goes, they were all playing in the front yard a second ago, and they asked the kids, and none of them seemed to know what happened to them. So Carl went out, searched the yard, walked up and down the street, knocked on a few neighbors' doors. Nobody saw him leave the area of the front of the house. And at that point, Louisville police was called. Carl was smart. I would have done this if I was him. He called his radio station and he said, hey, we need a lot of searchers out here right now. Put it on the radio that my son's missing and we need people. And they did. And within hours, they had 1,000 people on Clermont Street. And the police were tasked with trying to organize them into useful searches. And the police assisted with this. And that number of people stayed on the street till 4 a.m. Wow. Wow. At 4 a.m. they all went home. The police said that they'd meet at the house at 8 a.m. the next day. They did. And they arrived to a driving rainstorm. They had about 1,000 people again show up that morning. And the police broke them up into groups of 25 to 100 searchers each. And they took certain blocks within this neighborhood. And the Louisville Jefferson Civil Defense Organization was one of the heads of the search. A Louisville canine unit arrived first thing in the morning, and they tracked Scotty's scent to a hole in a fence surrounding 2 percolation ponds about 2 blocks away. The mother said that Scotty had gone to this location with her in the past, and he walked up the hill, the steep hill surrounding the ponds. He'd walked up the hill part way and he would slide down. He loved doing that. But to get to the hole in the fence, he'd have to climb up a 45-foot hill, up a very steep embankment, something he'd never done all the way. And then after he climbs the embankment, get over a 4-foot fence into the pond area. After the canine hit on that scent, they sent in 10 search and rescue people to search the pond closest to the opening in the fence. And they started dragging it. Ponds were 22 foot deep. Each pond was 8.5 acres. Well, they dragged the pond for a half a day. They got nothing. The next day, February 20th, dragging of the ponds continued. Search groups were working the neighborhoods, and the police were out interviewing each of the neighbors along that street. Sometimes they had to come back at night when the people came home from work if they had been home during that day and seen anything unusual. And the babysitter was interviewed at length by the police, as well as Carl the father. At this time, Louisville put in their dive team on the ponds, and they started to search. They'd hold hands and they'd just slowly move through the ponds. At this point, the water company at the end of the day said that they would be considered they would consider draining the ponds if the boy wasn't found soon. February 21st through the 23rd, ponds continued to be dragged. Divers searching continued. So now they have 3 days into dragging the ponds and diving those ponds with multiple divers. Nothing. And they've continued to search the neighborhood, interview people, delivery drivers, post office people that came through the area. They were trying everything they could, and they were running into a dead end. February 24th, 2,000 searchers showed up in the neighborhood. Yeah, I think Carl had a big fan club who loved kids, who wanted to find little Scotty. Also on the 26th, the Louisville police chief held a press conference. And I think he was getting worried that Scotty hadn't been found. So he put up one of his best captains to run the investigation. A guy named Emmett Paul was going to take charge. Now, I'll stop you there for a second. As somebody who's been involved in many field investigations, putting a captain that sits behind a desk all day, all night for 90% of their career, who hasn't worked in the field in probably a decade or more, putting them in charge of an investigation in the field, I think is a horrible idea. For some of the reasons I already said. I want a person that's doing the job now, that knows that neighborhood inside out and backwards, that's great at interviewing, and the best thing, the most important thing, you want the person in charge to pick the best team, the best officers in Louisville to work this case. I want them hand-picked. And you want somebody that's great at interviewing, great at searching, knows the neighborhood, knows criminals inside and out, somebody who goes around and picks out all of the sexual registrants within 5 miles of that house. Yeah, and I want contact made with each one of those people. So putting a captain in charge, not my idea of a great time. And I'm sure the officers in the field thought, oh God, just let me do my job. Mrs. Marker said a couple things to the press. She said that she was absolutely certain that Scotty was alive. She said he was a good swimmer and he knew how to swim. So why would he be dead in the pond? That's what she said. Louisville police gave all the documents they had up till February 26th. That would be 8 days worth of investigation to the FBI. Ponds continued to be drained. The FBI said that they weren't coming into the case at that point. They were just reviewing documents. My belief, what they were doing with those documents, is they went to Quantico. And they went to the profiling unit. What they do is they take all of the information you have in your investigations. Date, time, location, age of the victim, blah, 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 blah. And they develop a profile of a suspect, if a suspect did it. They may say, oh, the suspect's a white male, 31 to 40, manual laborer, 5'7" to 6'2", and they will tell you all these things in the report. And in my career, I had these 3 times. One of them was a rapist in downtown San Jose. And they were 100% accurate on their profile when we ended up arresting him. Took months, but they were accurate. And so the ponds will continue to be drained. Are you okay? Huh? You're good, girl. February 27th, police stated there was no evidence that Scotty was in the pond. It was just a normal part of their investigation. There's no evidence he isn't in the pond either. Right? February 28th, Captain Paul gave another press conference. These administrators, this is what they're good at: getting their name out there, getting in front of the press. Normal cops, we don't want to talk to anybody. We just want to do our job. But not Captain Paul. Stated that his team is following up on all 911, all leads related to Scotty, retracing earlier steps, and re-interviewing witnesses. This was the quote he made. Said, basically, we don't know a hell of a lot more about the case than when the boy was reported missing. I got to give him accolades. I got to give him big accolades for being honest. Normally, when an administrator takes over a case, they want to look like a big shot. We're making big headway, blah, blah, blah. They're making no headway. They're not getting anywhere. So, let me show you this. This is the photo where Scotty's home was on Claremont Street. This was the opening in the fence and fit a man through it into this southern pond. Now each pond is connected by huge pipes. I could fit through it. I'd have to kneel down, bend over a lot, but you could fit through it. There was a couple of them. Each pond was 8.5 acres. Each pond was 22 feet deep. So Scotty would have had to have walked a long distance uphill over a fence into the pond. So far, nobody thought he'd do it except a dog. Dog placed him at the fence. But I got to tell you, because his mom said he had been to that area before, then maybe the dog was picking up on prior scent trails. Because the dog didn't go past the hole in the fence. And that is a key. If the dog would have walked down to the water line, now we got something. But it stopped at the fence line. Why? Because Scotty had been there before. He had rolled down those hills. Just saying. The water company said that both ponds would be drained by March 3rd. And they continued to drag these giant hooks over each pond, hoping to hook a body. And then when the water got low enough, they actually sent people inside these giant conduit pipes that connect both ponds, and they hand searched them and dragged them, both. On March 3rd, the second pond was drained. And the Ohio Valley Rescue and Kentucky Rescue Association searched that pond by hand and the pipes, inch by inch. And this went on between March 4th and March 10th. They committed 5 days. Now these ponds aren't giant, folks. If you had 30 searchers, you could walk almost shoulder to shoulder and carry that whole pond as just covered as you walked it. They said there was muck in the bottom, but it wasn't so mucky that it could conceal a child's body. But they still went through it foot by foot, inch by inch, while the other pond was still draining. So the first pond, they got nothing. They didn't see anything, no clothing, no nothing. Second pond, March 10th through the 15th. Again, inch by inch. Again, nothing to show Scotty was there, no evidence he had ever been there. And then they did the smartest thing. Both ponds are empty. They sent men into the pipes between the two ponds. Nothing. They first put big hooks on and dragged those pipes. Nothing. Then they sent men through when they were completely cleaned out. Nothing. So you're the investigator. What do you do now? Ponds are empty. Boy's not there. Pipe's empty. Boy's not there. Well, when they announced that Scotty wasn't in those ponds, on March 16th, the FBI stated that they were working with Louisville PD. Now, I've stated this many times, and I'll state it again. The FBI does not work missing persons cases unless it's a child under 4. Child under 4, they have a special category for that. And obviously, if it's a kidnapping, that's different. Now, the FBI has what's called the Child Abduction Task Force Team. These aren't like FBI agents. I told you on the Paulides case, myself and a detective were handpicked to go and work that case by the special agent in charge of the abduction team. He stated he needed officers up there who worked in a big city who talked to a lot of criminals that could go up there and help him. We were there the next day. But the Child Abduction Task Force team, first class, absolutely the best. If your child was kidnapped or missing, you want the FBI involved right away. Now, I understand why the hesitation to get involved in this case, because they probably all thought that Scotty was in the water and he was going to be found. Well, not true. So between the 16th and the 30th of March, the FBI and Louisville police worked together, methodically going through all of the witness statements, all of the circumstances, everything related to his disappearance. And they were also waiting on the profiler report from Quantico. And as they're waiting, hold on to your hats. March 31st, 11 a.m. A mechanic working for the water department is on the south pond, and he looks down and he sees a body floating face up. Calls the fire department right away. The fire department finds the body 2 feet from shore. They transport it to Louisville General Hospital. Let's stop right there. This is super important, folks. Super important. When there's obvious signs of death, rigor mortis, postmortem lividity, the settling of blood in your body cavity, decapitation, you see brain matter. Those are positive signs of death. Under those circumstances, by law, you cannot move the body unless you're a coroner or coroner's assistant. By law, paramedics never do under those circumstances. They leave it there and the coroner takes it. Now, if none of those are there, then you transport the body to the hospital. Well, Louisville Fire Department had that body transported to the hospital. And why is that important? Because I don't think the fire department would break the law. My hunch tells me there were no positive signs of death, and that's why he was transported. The mechanic saw the body taken from the water and said that there was some mud on the chest, and they found one rock under his shirt, but there was no mud anywhere on his body other than a slight bit on his chest, which would mean that if he had been in the mud of the reservoir, then only this part of his chest would have been in the mud, not the whole body, which means he would have been obviously seen during the search. So the body's at the general hospital by noon, and there's an on-scene investigation. At 3 p.m. that same day, the coroner stated they were starting an autopsy immediately. I've never heard of an autopsy that fast. Coroners usually are at least a day or two behind, but Coroner William Anderson stated he'll have a press conference the following Wednesday with tests being conducted. He did say that there was no violence to the body, that the body was that of Scotty, and that he was wearing all his clothes. Body was first seen about 8 feet from the shore. When fire department arrived, it was 2 feet from shore. So that's all they give up at this point. That same day, the superintendent of the water department, it gets cornered by press. And they ask him, how did this happen? His quote, "I'm at a complete loss as to where the body came from. I don't see how the body could have been overlooked." End of quotes. That's a pretty strong statement. And you don't hear officials saying things like that very often. The press also tracks down the head of one of the search and rescue organizations that was there, Ohio Valley, which was there for the search of both ponds. This man's name was Pat Gillette. Pat says, based on the thorough search, is that Scotty was not in the reservoir until after we completed the search. Wow. Wow. I've never heard confidence that strong. I'm not saying he was wrong at all. I believe he thinks he was 100% right, and he probably was. April 8th. Autopsy partially completed per the coroner. Dr. William Christopher, professor and chairman of the University of Louisville Med School of Pathology. Now, the body had gone from one coroner. Now it had gone to the University of Louisville. Right there, I find that interesting, because now it's at the School of Pathology. Dr. Christopher said something fascinating. One of his first statements. He said he had not yet determined the date and time of death. What? It's been 41 days. Why is it such a big deal? I mean, so you're off a couple days, right? That's a big deal. It's a big deal. Because the little boy's not going to walk around that pond for a couple days. But what if Scotty had only been dead a day? Or hours? Remember, the fire department transported him to the hospital. You can't transport dead bodies. So he didn't show all the signs that you would think of that are positive for death. And the coroner understands if he says that the date and time of death of Scotty was 36 hours ago, okay, then hold your taters. Where was Scotty for 39 and a half days? Do you see the predicament? He did say it was death by drowning. And he said there was no evidence of trauma. But the evasiveness of the coroner to put a date and time bothers me to no end. If the body had been dead for 41 days, he won't be able to place a time of death. But he said time of death. He would only say, Scotty's been dead for 38 to 41 days. He'd say something like that. But he didn't. And I went forward years. And that coroner never came back and said what the date and time of death was that I could ever find. Why? I've stated this to you hundreds of times. Coroners know something highly unusual is going on. They've told me. They wanted me to come speak at their conference. They know something is going on. Scotty could swim. So let's pretend he fell in the water. He just would have swam. And this area is surrounded by homes. You think somebody would have Heard splashing in the water? Heard a little boy swimming up and down the pools? No? This is the first case where I've ever seen two people high in the administration come out and say, the body wasn't there when we searched. And that is huge. This is a cornerstone 411 case. I'd love to understand what happened to Scotty, but I think the University of Louisville Medical School, their pathology department needs to release some reports to the public and tell us what really happened. And if you have somebody in that administration or somebody going to medical school there, tell them to contact me. I'd love to talk to them. In the meantime, Carl and Pat lost a great little boy. I wish I could have found a picture of him. I tried so hard, I just could not. Finally, I want to show you this. So again, this is where his house was. Here's where the hole was in the fence. This is where his body was found, way over here. Way over here. Now, theory one is he went in here, ran all the way down, fell in here? Ran over here, ran down to the water, fell in, drowned, and got washed through by pipes to here. I don't believe either one of those. Remember, those pipes were searched incessantly. Nothing was found. Nothing was found in either pond, and I read you the statements of the organizers. Something strange happened. No, it's not a serial killer like in the conventional sense. I have way too many of these cases in Missing 411, a sobering coincidence for it to be something like that. I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Thanks again for being here. I greatly appreciate you listening. I hope you post these on your social media. This is a case I've never heard of before, but you watch how many times people copy it from here on out. Yeah. And they'll say, oh, I did the research on this. Yeah, right. Sure. Thanks again. Our website, NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. It's our store. You can find our movies. All on Amazon. I'll start with Missing 411. There's 3 of them. Please go out there and watch them. You will understand this much better. In the meantime, I'll give you a quick look at how hard my assistant is working right here. Take care. Paulides out.